Hey guys, tonight we are going to set sail on a journey, but maybe not the one you're picturing from the movies. We are trading the swashbuckling adventures, the epic sword fights, and the charismatic eyeliner-wearing captains for a much more authentic experience. We are diving head first into the sticky, smelly, and frankly quite boring reality of being a pirate during the Golden Age. Think less adventure on the high seas and more floating wooden prison with terrible food. Honestly, given the conditions, your chances of making it through this historical simulation without developing a nasty rash or a deep-seated fear of biscuits are slim. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, I would love to see where you are all tuning in from tonight. Let me know your city and the current time in the comments below. It is always a quiet joy to see how far-flung our little community of night owls is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background tone, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story doesn't begin with a treasure map or a stolen ship. It begins with you, in the damp, grimy squalor of a port town. Let's say it's Bristol, or Port Royal, or maybe even the grimy docks of London, around the year 1718. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke, fish guts, and cheap rock. The cobblestones are slick with things you'd rather not identify. You are a rogue or an adventurer, your aegis stuck. Maybe you were a sailor on a merchant vessel, promised a decent wage that never quite materialized after all the deductions for food and supplies. Maybe you were a fisherman whose nets came up empty one too many times. Or perhaps you were pressed into service in the Royal Navy, which was less a career and more a state's ancient kidnapping. On a Navy ship, the discipline is brutal. The crack of the officer's whip is a far more common sound than the clinking of coins. The food is technically edible, but the weevils and the hardtack biscuits get their share first. You are constantly cold, perpetually damp, and paid a pittance for the privilege of possibly being blown to bits by a French cannonball. This is the backdrop. This is your reality. So, one day, your ship, let's say it's a merchant vessel hauling sugar and lumber, is becalmed in the sweltering Caribbean heat. The sea is like glass. The air is heavy. And then, on the horizon, a new sail appears. It moves with an unnerving speed and purpose. As it gets closer, you see the flag. It's not the friendly ensign of a fellow trading nation. It might be a simple black flag, or perhaps something more menacing, like the skull and crossbones. Panic ripples through your crew. Your captain, a man more concerned with his cargo than his crew, barks orders. But it's too late. The pirate ship pulls alongside. There's a crash of grappling hooks, a splintering of wood, and suddenly your deck is swarming with men who look well. They look like you, but wilder. They are not the clean-shaven, elegantly dressed villains of fiction. They are sunburned, scarred, and dressed in a chaotic mismatch of stolen clothes. They move with an energy that's both terrifying and, strangely, liberating. They don't want to fight to the death. That's bad for business. They just want the cargo, the ship, and any valuables. But they also need something else. Skilled hands. This brings us to a little-known fact about pirate recruitment. They weren't just looking for brutes. They were headhunting. The most valuable prizes on a captured ship were often the men with useful trades. A skilled carpenter who could repair a mast in a storm. A cooper who knew how to maintain the precious water in drum barrels. And, most prized of all, a surgeon. If you happen to be one of these, you're not just a captain. You're a hot commodity. Let's imagine you're that carpenter. The pirate captain, a man who probably looks more like a disgruntled baker than a sea demon, sizes you up. He offers you a choice. It's a simple one. You can stay with your captured ship, which will likely be stripped and scuttled, leaving you and the rest of the crew adrift in a small boat with little hope of rescue. Or you can join them. You can become one of them. And here is the crucial point, one that historians still debate. Was this choice made under duress? Or was it a genuine opportunity? For many, it was a rational economic decision. The pirate captain lays out the terms. No more tyrannical officers. The captain is elected and can be voted out. All major decisions are put to a vote. And most importantly, You get a full share of the plunder. No deductions, no tricks. You fight. You get paid. It's a dangerous life, yes, but it's a life where you have a voice and a chance at real wealth, compared to the slow, grinding misery of your previous life. The offer sounds less like a threat and more like a promotion. You look at your old captain, now tied to the mast. You look at the ragged, but surprisingly democratic, crew of pirates. You weigh the certainty of your miserable past against the uncertainty of a dangerous, but potentially rewarding, future. You take a deep breath, the salty, tar-scented air filling your lungs, and you nod. Jordan, your old life is over. You are, for better or worse, a pirate now. Your nod hangs in the thick, salty air for a moment. There's no grand cheer, no celebratory backslapping. Instead, a man detaches himself from the crowd. Yes, not the captain who spoke to you, but someone else. He carries a certain air of authority, less about command and more about administration. This, you'll soon learn, is the quartermaster, arguably the most important man on the ship. While the captain is the leader in battle and navigation, the quartermaster is the manager, the magistrate, the one who handles the day-to-day running of this floating enterprise. He is the HR department, the union rep, and the judge, all rolled into one. He gestures for you to follow him to the captain's cabin, which is surprisingly Spartan. The previous owner's fancy maps and sextants have been pushed into a corner, replaced by a simple wooden able and a flickering lantern. The quartermaster unrolls a piece of parchment. It's a document, covered in surprisingly neat handwriting. These are the ship's articles, the pirate code. This isn't just a loose band of thieves. It's a structured organization with a surprisingly detailed employee handbook. The quartermaster begins to read the articles aloud, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. You are expected to agree to each one. This is your contract negotiation, and it's non-negotiable. First, the principles of governance. One man, one vote. Every man on the ship, from the newest recruit, that's you to the captain, has an equal say in all major decisions. Where to sail, whether to attack a potential prize, and, crucially, who gets to be captain. The captain, you learn, can be deposed and replaced at any time by a majority vote if the crew feels HES incompetent or acting tyrannical. This is a stunning departure from the rigid hierarchy of the Navy or merchant service, where you wouldn't dare even look an officer in the eye. Next, the payment plan. And this is the part that truly seals the deal for most new recruits. There are no wages, there are only shares. The plunder from any prize is divided according to a strict system. A regular sailor gets one full share. The captain might get 1.5, or perhaps 2 shares. Skilled craftsmen, like a carpenter or a cooper, get a share and a quarter, or maybe a share and a half. The quartermaster explains that as the ship's carpenter, you're entitled to a share and a quarter. It's a meritocracy. Your skills are valued, quantified, and rewarded directly. Then come the rules of conduct, designed to keep a ship full of heavily armed men from tearing each other apart. No fighting on board. Any disputes must be settled ashore, with pistols or cutlasses, like gentlemen of fortune. On the ship, harmony is paramount. Lights out at 8 o'clock. This one is a surprise. You pictured pirates carousing and drinking all night, but the reality is far more mundane. Once the sun goes down, most activity ceases. It's a practical rule to conserve candles and lamp oil to ensure the men on watch are alert. Gambling with cards or dice is forbidden for the same reason. It leads to quarrels on deck. And now, for a truly strange and specific part of the contract, a sort of proto-insurance plan. This is a little detail that mainstream stories always miss. The articles list a schedule of compensation for injuries sustained in the line of duty. A lost right arm might be worth 600 pieces of 8. A left arm, a lost eye, 100 pieces of 8. These funds are taken from the total plunder before it's divided into shares. It's a form of workers' compensation, a guarantee that even if your maintenance can no longer work, you won't be left with nothing. It's a level of foresight and mutual care you would never have found on your old merchant ship. Finally, the punishments. Stealing from a fellow crew, mate, or deserting in battle carries the ultimate penalty. Not a flogging, but something worse. You'd either be executed on the spot or marooned, left on a deserted island with a flask of water, a pistol, and a single shot. A slow, lonely end. The quartermaster finishes reading. He looks at you, his eyes unreadable in the lantern light. He dips a quill pen into an ink pot and holds it out. And here we come to a point that historians still debate. Most sailors from this era were illiterate. They couldn't sign their name. So how did they bind themselves to these articles? Did they actually sign a physical document? Some probably did, leaving a simple X as their mark. For others, the act was more symbolic. They might swear an oath on a Bible if one was aboard, or more likely, on a shared weapon, like a cutlass or an axe, or even a human skull kept for the occasion. The physical act of making a mark or swearing the oath was what mattered. It's a public declaration to the entire crew. You take the quill. You are not a man of letters. You press the nib to the parchment, below the signatures and marks of the other crew members, and draw crew decks. Your mark. It feels small and insignificant on the page, but its weight is immense. You have just formally renounced your old life and sworn allegiance to this new, democratic, and dangerous family. You are no longer just a captured carpenter. You are a signatory to the articles. You have a vote, a share, and a set of rules to live or die by. The contract is sealed, with your mark drying on the parchment. You step out of the relative quiet of the captain's cabin and back onto the main deck. The transition is jarring. It is not just a change in light and space, but an assault on your senses, starting with your nose. The smell hits you first. A physical presence you have to push through. It's a complex, layered bouquet of horrors that your brain struggles to process. The most immediate scent is tar, thick, pungent, and ever-present. It's used constantly to waterproof the ship's hull and rigging, and on a hot day, it melts slightly, releasing a powerful, almost suffocating aroma. It gets on your hands, your clothes, your food. You will learn to live with it, but you will never get used to it. Woven into the tar is the damp, musty smell of rotting wood. This ship, your new home, is in a constant state of decay. Seawater seeps into every plank, every beam, creating a permanent, mildew-y dampness that clings to the air. Then comes the human element. Imagine dozens of men, packed into a confined space, with no access to regular bathing. They work all day under a hot sun, sweating profusely. Their clothes, often just one or two sets, are stiff with dried sweat, soot, and grime. The concept of personal hygiene is a luxury you left on shore. The resulting smell of stale, unwashed bodies is a constant companion. It's the smell of survival, not comfort. And beneath all of that, a deeper, more stomach-turning odor emanates from below deck. It's the bilge, the lowest part of the ship's hull, where all the foul water collects. Seawater that leaks through the hull, spilled drunk, vomit, runoff from the livestock pens, and waste of every conceivable kind pools in the darkness, sloshing back and forth with the motion of the ship. It's a stagnant, anaerobic soup, and its foul, sulphurous stench rises up through the floorboard, a constant reminder of the filth you are floating on. Your eyes adjust next, taking in the scene of organized chaos. The deck is not the clean, spacious expanse you see in films. It's a cluttered, hazardous obstacle course. Coils of rope lie in wait to trip you. Spare spars and barrels are lashed to every available space. A small pen near the bow might hold a few chickens or a pig, adding their own unique sounds and smells to the environment. The wood of the deck is dark, stained, and perpetually slick with a thin film of sea spray and grime. And then there's the noise, the constant, groaning symphony of a wooden ship at sea. The creak of the masts as they strain against the wind. A sound like an old man's aching joints. The riff makes lap of waves against the hull. The sharp snap of the canvas sails as they catch a gust of wind. The shrill cries of gulls circling overhead. And woven through it all, the voices of the crew. Not the cheerful yo-ho of storybooks, but a cacophony of shouts, curses, and commands in a dozen different accents: English, Dutch, French, Spanish, and African dialects all mixed together in the pidgin language of the sea. You are shown to your space. There is no personal cabin, no bunk. You are assigned a spot on the gun deck, the same deck that houses the cannons. It is cramped and dark. When the ship is cleared for action, this area becomes a frantic, deadly workspace. But it's not. It's the crew's sleeping quarters. Your bed is a hammock, a simple canvas sling that you'll have to string up between two beams every night. It's a surprisingly practical invention, as it sways with the motion of the ship, making sleep a little more stable, but it offers zero privacy. You will sleep, eat, and exist within arm's reach of your fellow pirates. Your first meal is handed to you. A piece of salted beef, so tough it feels like chewing on leather, and a hardtack biscuit. The beef is briny and tastes vaguely of the barrel it's been stored in for months. The biscuit is, as the name implies, rock hard. You have to dunk it in water or grog to soften it enough to bite. A weird little fact about life at sea: some sailors became so accustomed to this diet that when they returned to shore, they found soft bread and fresh food to be unappetizing and even difficult to digest. Their bodies had simply forgotten what real food was like. As you stand there, trying to chew your leathery dinner, a wave of reality washes over you. This is it. This is your new home. A floating, stinking, noisy, overcrowded block of wood. The romantic notion of pirate freedom begins to fray at the edges, replaced by the grim understanding of the life you just signed up for. Historians often talk about the grand battles and the treasure, but they sometimes neglect the sheer sensory overload of the environment. The question that historians still debate is how much this brutal environment contributed to the pirates' notorious ferocity. Were they inherently violent men, or did the constant, grinding discomfort and filth of their daily lives strip away their civility and leave them with nothing but a raw, desperate edge? Looking around at the grimy faces and the cramped squalor, you suspect it's the latter. This isn't a life of adventure. It's a life of endurance. The sun rises the next day, not with a gentle dawn chorus, but with the sharp kick of a boot against your hammock and a gruff shout to get up. There is no easing into the day on this ship. The work begins before the sun is fully over the horizon, and it rarely ends before it's sunk back down. Your first assignment, as one of the newer, less skilled members of the crew, your carpentry skills are for special projects, not daily chores, is the most basic and relentless task on board. Cleaning the deck. You're handed a holy stone. It's not a sacred relic. It's a large, heavy block of sandstone, maybe the size of a large book. Some have ropes attached so they can be dragged back and forth by a team of men. Others are smaller, for kneeling and scrubbing by hand. Your job is to get down on your hands and knees and scour the wooden planks. The process is methodical and mind-numbing. First, the deck is wetted down with buckets of seawater. Then, sand is scattered across the planks to act as an abrasive. And then you scrub. You push the heavy stone back and forth, your muscles quickly starting to burn. The goal is not just to make the deck look clean, though that's part of it. This is crucial maintenance. The constant scrubbing serves several purposes. It removes the layer of grime, algae, and bird droppings that makes the deck dangerously slippery. A fall on a rolling ship can easily mean a broken bone or a man overboard, which is a mere certain death sentence. More importantly, the combination of salt water and scrubbing helps to preserve the wood. It scours away the surface rot and prevents the caulking between the planks from drying out and cracking, which would lead to leaks. It's a relentless battle against the decay that is constantly trying to reclaim the ship. This is where you first truly understand the monotony. It's not a quick job. It can take hours, the entire morning, to do a single section of the deck properly. You work alongside other men, none of you speaking much, lost in the rhythm of the work. The sun climbs higher, beating down on your back. The salt from the seawater stings, the scrapes on your knuckles. Your knees ache from pressing against the hard wood. And here's a quirky little detail about the Holy Stone. Why the name? The most common theory, and the one that sailors themselves often repeated, is that the larger stones were originally taken from the ruins of St. Nicholas Church in Great Yarmouth, England. Another story suggests They were called holy stones because the men assumed a prayer-like posture, on their knees, to use them. Historians are still not entirely certain of the origin, but the name stuck. The smaller books, used for getting into tight corners, were nicknamed prayer books for the same reason. It's a classic piece of sailors' gallows humor, finding a way to joke about their backbreaking, prayer-like labor. As you scrub, you notice the details of the deck you missed in your initial shot. You see the dark stains that won't come out, hints of past battles or butchered livestock. You see the crude carvings and initials left by other sailors during long, boring watches. You see the imperfections in the wood, the repairs made by the ship's carpenter, your predecessor, or perhaps your future self. The hierarchy of the ship becomes clear in these daily chores. The veteran pirates, the ones with proven fighting skills or specialized trades, are exempt from this kind of drudgery. They might be mending sails, inspecting the cannons, or maintaining the rigging. The grunt work, the endless, repetitive tasks, fall to the new man. It's how you prove your worth and your stamina. It's a test. Can you handle the boredom? Can you endure the physical strain without complaint? By midday, when you're finally allowed to stop, your hands around your back is a knot of pain. You look at the section of deck you've cleaned. It is noticeably lighter, the wood grain visible again. But you know, with a sinking feeling, that tomorrow it will be just as grimy, and you will have to do it all over again, and again the day after that. This is the reality that shatters the pirate fantasy. There are no treasure maps being poured over, no swashbuckling duels on the quarterdeck. The bulk of a pirate's life was not adventure. It was manual labor. It was an endless, grinding routine of maintenance, designed to keep their wooden world from falling apart. The true enemy was the Royal Navy or a Spanish galleon. It was the sea, the sun, the salt, and the simple, relentless passage of time. The question still debated by maritime historians is what percentage of a pirate's time was spent on these mundane tasks versus actual piracy. The consensus leans heavily towards the mundane. Weeks, even months, could go by between successful captures, and in all that time, the scrubbing, the scraping, and the mending never stopped. It was the price you paid for the slim chance of a prize. Just when your back is screaming from wholly stoning the deck, the quartermaster gives you a new task, one that is somehow even less desirable. He points towards a hatch leading down into the claustrophobic darkness below. Your new job is to work the bilge pump. If scrubbing the deck was a battle against visible decay, this is a descent into the ship's foul, hidden underbelly. You climb down the ladder, and the air immediately changes. The relatively fresh sea breeze is gone, replaced by the concentrated stench you first noticed when you boarded. It's the smell of the bilge water. And down here, it's overwhelming. The air is hot, stagnant, and so thick with the odor of rotten waste that you can almost taste it. The only light comes from a single, swaying lantern, casting low, dancing shadows that make the cramped space feel even more menacing. The bilge is the lowest point inside the ship. It's not a room, it's a space. The gap between the ship's bottom and the cargo hold floor. And it's where everything unwanted ends up. Water is the main culprit. No wooden ship from this era was ever completely watertight. Seawater constantly weeps through the seams of the hull planks. Rainwater drips down from the decks above. But it's not just water. It's a vile cocktail, spilled grog, greasy runoff from the cook's galley, blood from butchered animals, vomit from seasick sailors, and the inescapable leakage from the primitive toilets, known as the heads of easement. It all trickles down and gathers here, in the dark, this stagnant pool of filth, sloshing back and forth with every roll of the ship, is a serious threat. If too much water accumulates, it can affect the ship's stability, making its luggation top-heavy. In a storm, this could be fatal. More insidiously, this bilge water soaks into the ship's internal timbers, the ribs of its skeleton, causing them to rot from the inside out. So, it has to be removed. Constantly, your workplace is the bilge pump. It's a simple, crude piece of machinery. Essentially, it's a long wooden or lead pipe reaching down into the bilge water, with a piston inside that's operated by a large, heavy lever on the deck above or, in this case, a pump handle in the hold. You and another sailor are put on the handles. Your job is to pump. You push down. You pull up. Over and over. With each stroke, the pump groans in protest, and a gush of foul, chunky, brownish-gray water is drawn up the pipe and spat out onto the deck, where it then runs out through the scuppers and back into the sea. The work is brutal. It's physically demanding, requiring a constant, rhythmic effort that strains your arms, shoulders, and back. The air is so bad, it makes your eyes water and your stomach churn. You try to breathe through your mouth, but the taste is just as bad as the smell. Within minutes, you are covered in a fine spray of the very water you're pumping out. It's cold, greasy, and you try not to think about what's in it. This is where you might encounter one of the stranger, more disgusting phenomena of sea life, bilge gas. As the organic waste in the water decomposes in an oxygen-poor environment, it releases gases like hydrogen, sulfide, and methane. This mixture is not only flammable, posing a risk of explosion from a stray spark, but it can also be toxic, capable of sickening or even suffocating the men working in the hold. Experienced sailors knew to be wary. If the bilge water stopped stinking that often meant a dangerous buildup of odorless, deadly gas. Historians are still discussing the full extent of the health impacts of these conditions. It's hard to separate the illnesses caused by bilge exposure from those caused by malnutrition or other diseases. But it's undeniable that spending hours in what was essentially a floating sewer had to have consequences. This is a far cry from the image of pirates breathing in the fresh, clean sea air. The reality for many was breathing in poison. A bizarre and little-known fact is that sailors sometimes tried to sweeten the bilge. This didn't involve sugar. It meant dropping hot cannonballs or chunks of iron into the bilge water. The idea was that the intense heat would cause a chemical reaction that would neutralize some of the foul gases. It was a primitive and probably not very effective form of chemical engineering, a desperate attempt to make their environment marginally less toxic. You spend what feels like an eternity at the pump, your world reduced to the squeak of the handle, the gush of foul water, and the burning in your muscles. There is no glory here. There is no adventure. This is a ship's digestive system, and you are a part of its grim, essential function. It's the kind of thankless, repulsive labor that held the pirate world together, far from the romance of sword fights and buried gold. It was a job that had to be done, day in and day out, just to keep the ship, and everyone on it, from sinking into the filth. After your shift in the suffocating depths of the bilge, you're relieved to be sent above that, back into the open air. A breeze, which only yesterday felt normal, now feels astonishingly fresh and clean. Your new task, however, is no less tedious. You are assigned to sail mending. You, with your carpenter's hands, are deemed deft enough for the job. You find a relatively clear spot on the deck, out of the way of the sailors working the rigging, and join a small group of men sitting around a massive expanse of heavy, stiff canvas. This is one of the ship's spare sails, or perhaps one that's been taken down for repairs. The scale of it is hard to comprehend up close. It's not a simple sheet. It's a colossal patchwork of thick, woven fabric, heavy and unwieldy. Your tools are simple. A sailmaker's palm, which is a leather strap that fits over your hand with a small metal dimple in the palm, a large, thick needle, a block of beeswax, and a spool of heavy twine. The palm isn't for sewing in the traditional sense. It's for pushing the thick needle through the layers of canvas, something your bare fingers could never do. Your task is to find and repair any signs of wear and tear. A small chafe mark from where the sail rubbed against a rope, a tiny hole from a flying spark from the galley chimney, or a tear from a recent squall. Every single imperfection, no matter how small, has to be meticulously patched and reinforced. A small weakness can, under the immense pressure of a strong wind, become a catastrophic tear that renders the sail useless. And on a ship that is entirely dependent on the wind for its power, a useless sail is a critical failure. The work is slow and requires intense concentration. You run the twine over the block of beeswax, coating it to make it stronger and more water-resistant. You push the needle through the tough canvas using the heel of your palm, a motion that is awkward at first, but soon becomes a rhythmic, practiced movement. You stitch, pull the twine tight, and repeat. It's a craft, a skill that every good sailor was expected to have at least a basic grasp of. This is the hidden labor of the age of sail. We see ships in paintings and films, their sails billowing majestically. We rarely think about the constant, painstaking work required to keep them in that condition. Sails were incredibly expensive, one of the most valuable single assets on a ship after the hull itself. A new set of sails could cost a fortune, so preserving the ones you had was paramount. As you sit there, stitching under the sun, you get a sense of the ship's rhythm. The work is communal. The men around you might be telling a story, humming a sea shanty, or just quietly working. The shanties, you learn, aren't just for fun. They are work songs. Their rhythm and tempo designed to coordinate tasks, like hauling on a rope or raising an anchor. But here, in the quiet work of mending, the talk is more subdued. And here's a strange little fact about sailcloth. It was often made from hemp or flax, and was a target for one of the ship's most persistent pests, rats. Rats would chew through sails for reasons that aren't entirely clear. Some historians think they were after the starchy sizing used to treat the canvas, while others believe they just like to chew on it to file down their constantly growing teeth. Whatever the reason, a rat-chewed hole was as dangerous as one caused by a storm. This meant that part of sail maintenance was also pest control. The hours stretch on. Your fingers become sore. Your eyes strain from focusing on the tiny stitches. The sun moves across the sky. The work is repetitive, almost meditative. Stitch, twirl, wax, stitch, twirl, wax. It's another piece of the boring reality of this life. You are not fighting or plundering. You are a tailor, a mender, a conservator. You are part of the vast, unseen maintenance crew that kept the age of sail afloat. Historians are still trying to fully quantify the economic life of a pirate ship, and the make-and-mend culture is a huge part of it. The ability of a crew to be self-sufficient was crucial. They couldn't just sail into a friendly port for repairs. Every broken rope had to be spliced, every leaky barrel fixed, and every torn sail patched. A pirate crew's success depended as much on their skills with a needle and a marlinspike as it did on their skills with a cutlass and a pistol. The argument continues over whether this self-sufficiency was a deliberate choice for independence or simply a necessity born from being outlaws. Looking at the worn canvas under your hands, you suspect it was both. As the day winds down, you look at the patch you've just finished. It's a rough, strong piece of work, crisscrossed with your waxed twine. It's not pretty, but it's functional. It will hold against the wind. It's a small, anonymous contribution to the survival of this vessel. And tomorrow, you know you'll be back, searching for the next fray, the next small hole, in the endless, vital, and utterly unglamorous task of stitching the ship back together. The monotonous labor of the day eventually gives way to the promise of a meal, but any hope you had for something warm and comforting is quickly dashed. You line up at the galley's small, smoky brick hearth in a and-filled box on deck, designed to prevent the ship from catching fire, nor handed you rations. The centerpiece of 2 nights' dinner, and most dinners to come, is hardtack. It's a biscuit, but not like any biscuit you've known. It's a simple, unleavened cracker made from flour, water, and sometimes a little salt, baked multiple times until it is, quite literally, as hard as a rock. This is not a culinary choice. It's a feat of preservation. Properly stored in barrels, hardtack could last for months, even years, making it the perfect staple food for long sea voyages. You hold the square cracker in your hand. It's grayish-brown and feels heavy for its size. Your first instinct is to bite into it, a mistake you only make once. Doing so is a good way to crack a tooth. The sailors have other names for it: ship's biscuit, sea bread, or, more descriptively, molar breakers and worm castles. The latter name is particularly apt. As you inspect your biscuit in the fading light, you notice the small holes riddling its surface. These are tunnels, the barrels of hardtack. No matter how well sealed, were almost always infested with the larvae and adults of flour beetles or biscuit weevils. They weren't expected, if unwelcome, part of the meal. The sailors had a dark sense of humor about it. A common joke was that it was better to eat your hardtack in the dark, so you couldn't see what you were eating along with it. To make the hardtack edible, you have to soften it. The most common method is to dunk it into whatever you're drinking, grog, beer, or even water. You drop it into your tin cup of watered-down rum and watch it slowly absorb the liquid. As it opens, a few small, dark shapes might float to the surface. Those are the weevils. You casually skim them off. This isn't considered disgusting. It's just part of the process. In fact, some sailors would claim the weevils were a welcome source of extra protein. Whether they were joking or had just been at sea too long is a matter of opinion. Once the biscuit has softened to the consistency of thick porridge, you can eat it. It tastes of stale flour, salt, and the faint, rum-soaked memory of the barrel it came from. It is filling, in a dense, starchy way, but it offers no pleasure, only sustenance. Alongside the hardtack is a piece of salted meat, usually beef or pork. Like the hardtack, it's preserved to the point of being almost indestructible. The meat is cured in barrels packed with so much salt that it draws out all the moisture, making it inhospitable to bacteria. The result is a piece of meat so tough and salty, it's barely recognizable. It has to be soaked in water for hours before it can be cooked, and even then, it's stringy, chewy, and overwhelmingly briny. Sometimes the cook might boil it with some of the softened hardtack to create a stew of sorts. A dish unappetizing line known as lobscouse or skilly gaily. This diet is the reason for one of the most terrifying and misunderstood scourges of the sea, scurvy. Your meals are almost entirely devoid of vitamin C. For weeks, maybe months on end, your only intake is preserved grains and salted meat. Fresh fruits and vegetables are a distant memory. Now for a truly weird and unpleasant bit of food lore from the sea. What happened when the hardtack was particularly old and infested? Sailors developed a technique. They would hold the biscuit over a flame or a hot piece of metal. The heat would cause the weevils and maggots deep inside the biscuit to wriggle their way out, and they could then be scraped off before eating. It was a primitive form of pest control born of sheer necessity. The historical debate he listened about whether the food was bad, everyone agrees it was atrocious. The argument is about how much this poor diet influenced pirate behavior. Did the constant, low-grade misery of their meals contribute to their desperation and their explosive, violent behavior when they finally reached land or captured a ship with fresh supplies? When a pirate ship captured a merchant vessel, the most prized loot was always gold. It was often the livestock, the ship's supply of fresh water, and any barrels of fruit or vegetables they had on board. The crew would fall upon these supplies with an almost religious fervor. You finish your meager, weevil-seasoned meal. Your stomach is full, but you are not satisfied. The food sits heavy, a salty, starchy lump. You look out at the vast, empty ocean. There are no farms out here, no orchards, no markets. Your survival depends entirely on the contents of the barrels in the hole, and as you know on the last of your rock-hard, insect-riddled biscuit, you understand that hunger on this ship isn't just about an empty stomach. It's a constant, grinding state of nutritional deprivation, a slow starvation that gnaws away at your health, day by day, as you sit there, trying to wash down the taste of salty beef and weevils. A crewmate ladles a measure of drink into your tin cup. It's not water. Water on a ship was a precious, foul-tasting commodity, stored in wooden casks for long periods. It would quickly become slimy without joy and taste strongly of the wood. The drink you're given is grog, the fuel that powers the pirate world. It's a simple, potent concoction. The base is rum, the ubiquitous spirit of the Caribbean, distilled from the sugarcane byproducts of the region's massive plantations. But it's not the smooth, aged rum you might find today. This is a hard, rough, and powerful spirit. Drinking it straight was often discouraged as a lead to drunkenness, brawls, and neglected duties. The invention of grog is famously attributed to a British Royal Navy admiral named Edward Vernon, nicknamed Old Grog because of the grog rum cloak he often wore. In 1740, He ordered that the sailors' daily rum ration be diluted with water to cut down on drunkenness. The mixture was not popular at first, but it soon became standard practice. Pirates, many of whom were ex-Navy sailors, adopted the custom, but with their own variations. The grog in your cup is a mixture of rum and that slimy, stale water. The alcohol in the rum helped to kill some of the bacteria in the water, making it safer to drink, and the water diluted the rum, making the supply last longer and keeping the men more or less sober. Often, a bit of lime or lemon juice would be added, if available. This was done for flavor. It was a practical measure, as it was noticed that citrus helped to ward off the dreaded scurvy. Finally, a little brown sugar or molasses might be stirred in to make the whole thing more palatable. You take a sip. It's not a pleasant drink. It's warm, slightly sweet, and has a brackish, woody aftertaste from the water cask. But the alcoholic burn of the rum is there, a comforting warmth that spreads through your chest. It dulls the ache in your back from the day's labor and takes the edge off the boredom. You begin to understand why it's so essential to life on board. It's a painkiller, a sedative, and a social lubricant, all in one cup. The daily rum ration was a sacred ritual. It was measured out precisely by the quartermaster, a testament to its value. To be denied your grog was a serious punishment. It was a core part of the unwritten social contract of the ship. And this brings us to a strange, little-known aspect of alcohol on a pirate ship: its use as a recruitment tool. When pirates captured a merchant vessel, one of the first things they often did was liberate the ship's liquor supply and offer it to the captured crew. For sailors used to the strictly controlled, watered-down rations of the Navy or a merchant ship, being offered unlimited access to rum was a powerful temptation. It was a taste of the pirates' freedom and a way to quickly win over potential new recruits who weren't tired of their miserable, sober lives. Historians are still debating the exact role of alcohol in pirate society. Was the heavy drinking a symptom of the desperate, harsh conditions of their lives, a form of self-medication, or was it a cause of their reckless and often self-destructive behavior? The stereotype of the perpetually drunk pirate is an exaggeration. A ship can't be run effectively by a crew that was constantly inebriated. Discipline had to be maintained, and watches had to be kept. But there's no doubt that alcohol was a central part of their culture, a crutch that helped them endure the monotony, the bad food, and the constant threat of death. As you finish your grog, you feel the tension in your shoulders ease slightly. The world seems a little less grim. The conversations around you grow a little louder, the laughter a little easier. The grog isn't about getting drunk. It's about getting through. It's medicine for the body and the soul, a temporary cure for the ailments of a life at sea. You watch the quartermaster lock away the main rum cask for the night. The supply is carefully managed. It's a resource as vital as gunpowder or fresh water. The democratic nature of the pirate ship had its limits, and access to rum was one of them. It was a controlled substance, doled out to keep the machine running, to keep the men compliant and capable. Your daily dose is both a right and a tool of control, a small comfort that makes the next day of back-breaking labor seem just a little more bearable. It's the glue, however toxic, that holds this miserable little society together. As darkness falls and you prepare to find your hammock, you become acutely aware that you are not alone. And I don't mean the dozens of other men crammed onto the gun deck. I mean the other inhabitants of the ship, the ones who don't get a vote or a share of the plunder, but who are on every voyage. You are living in a floating ecosystem of vermin. The most audacious of your new shipmates are the rats, not the timid little field mice of the shore, but big, bold ship rats. They're everywhere. You hear them at night, their tiny claws scratching inside the walls and their squeaking chatter forming a constant, unsettling background noise. You see them darting through the shadows of the hold, sleek and fat from their life of plenty. They are fearless, accustomed to the presence of humans, and they treat the ship as their personal larder. They gnaw through sacks of grain, contaminate food supplies, and, as you learned while mending sails, chew through the vital canvas and ropes for reasons of their own. They are a constant source of damage and filth. The crew wages are perpetual, losing war against them. Some ships kept a cat or a terrier on board, but on a vessel this large, a single animal could do little to stem the tide. The rats were simply part of the crew. Then there are the cockroaches. They thrive in the damp, dark, and warm conditions below deck. Turn over a barrel or lift a floorboard, and a swarm of them will scatter in every direction. They get into everything, scuttling over your bedding, exploring the galley, and taking their share of every meal, like the weevils in the hardtack. Their presence is so constant that you eventually learn to just ignore them. Brushing a cockroach off your arm in the middle of the night becomes as natural as scratching an itch. And this brings us to a particularly disgusting and often overlooked little detail of this infestation. It's not just the vermin themselves, but what they leave behind. The food supplies, particularly the dry goods, like flour and biscuits, were often contaminated with rat droppings and urine. This is something sailors of the time were well aware of. There are accounts of cooks trying to sift the droppings out of the flour before baking, a grim and largely futile task. The consumption of this contaminated food was a major contributor to the spread of disease on board. Beyond the rats and cockroaches, there are smaller, more intimate pests. Lice are rampant in the close, unwashed quarters. They pass from man to man with ease. You feel them crawling in your hair and in the seams of your clothes, a constant, maddening itch that you can never fully get rid of. Some men would shave their heads to try and combat them, but they would always return. Historians are still piecing together the full impact of this constant exposure to vermin and the diseases they carried. While we often think of pirates facing cannonballs and cutlasses, the reality is that they were far more likely to be laid low by an illness transmitted by a rat or a louse. Diseases like typhus, known as ship fever, could sweep through a crew with terrifying speed, incapacitating dozens of men in a matter of days. The debate continues about which specific plagues were most devastating, but the link between the vermin-infested conditions and epidemic disease is undeniable. You lie in your hammock, swaying gently with the motion of the ship, and listen to the secret life of the vessel, the scratching in the walls, the faint trestle of a cockroach near your head. You can feel a phantom itch on your scalp. You try to push it out of your mind, to tell yourself it's just part of the life, but the knowledge is there, unsettling and inescapable. Your world is not just wood, canvas, and men. It's a teeming, crawling, and gnawing world of creatures who are better adapted to this life than you are. This constant, low-level battle against filth and infestation wore men down. It was a psychological burden as much as a physical one. It added to the sense of squalor and decay, a constant reminder that your floating home was not a fortress, but a rotting, infested piece of wood, teeming with life that was actively working against your survival. The pirate's life was not a clean break from the world. It was a deep dive into its filthiest corners. The quartermaster has decided it's time. You learned the night watch. Your turn is the graveyard watch, the one from midnight to 4. After a few hours of fitful, itchy sleep, you're shaken awake. You stumble out of your hammock, your feet finding the deck in the near-total darkness of the gun deck. And this is where you truly appreciate your personal space, or rather, the complete lack of it. To get to the ladder leading to the main deck, you have to navigate an obstacle course of sleeping bodies. The gun deck is a forest of hammocks, slung so close together that they almost touch. You have to turn sideways, sucking in your gut, to squeeze between them. A stray elbow bumps a sleeping form, earning you a muffled curse. The air is thick with the sound of snoring, coughing, and the occasional nightmare-fueled shout. It's a strangely intimate and deeply impersonal space at the same time. You are surrounded by men, yet utterly alone in your waking state. Your hammock is your only piece of personal territory on this entire ship. It's your bed, your chair, and your storage space. During the day, it's unhooped and stowed away to clear the deck for work or battle. At night, it's your sanctuary. A small bag containing your few possessions, a spare shirt, a tin cup, maybe a knife hangs from the same hook. This is the sum total of your worldly goods. The concept of privacy, as you understand it from your life on land, does not exist here. You sleep, dress, and perform every personal act in the constant company of others. There are no doors to close, no walls to hide behind. Every argument, every conversation, every moment of weakness is public. This forced intimacy created a strange social dynamic. It could foster a powerful sense of brotherhood and camaraderie, a feeling that you were all literally in the same boat. But it could also breed resentment and friction. Minor annoyances. A man who snores too loudly or has a nervous cough could fester into major grievances over the law. Boring weeks at sea. This brings us to a peculiar little detail about shipboard life. The head. That's the nautical term for the toilet, and it was to room. It was typically a set of wooden planks with holes in them, located at the very bow the front of the ship, extending out over the water. This area was called the head because it was at the head of the ship. There were no stalls, no screens. You simply went about your business in full view of your crewmates, with the sea spray washing the area clean. It was cold, wet, and completely public for a new sailor. It was one of the most jarring and uncomfortable adjustments to make as you finally reach the main deck for your watch. The sense of exposure continues. The deck is dark, lit only by a few carefully shielded lanterns in the vast, indifferent light of the stars. The ship feels like a tiny, fragile bubble of human activity in an immense void of water and sky. Your job is simple. Stay awake. Stay alert. You watch the horizon for any unexpected sails. You listen for any changes in the sound of the wind or the rigging that might signal a coming storm. You make sure the lanterns don't go out. The loneliness of the night watch is a stark contrast to the oppressive closeness of the sleeping deck. Here, you are surrounded by nothing but the immense, dark sea. The minutes scroll by. To stay awake, you might pace the deck or talk quietly with the other man on watch. You might look up at the stars, which are brighter out here, away from the lights of the land, than you have ever seen them. Historians are still exploring the psychological effects of this dual life of extreme crowding and extreme isolation. How did it shape the pirate psyche? Did the lack of privacy contribute to their explosive need for release when they hit port? Did the lonely hours of the night watch foster a sense of fatalism, a feeling of being a small speck in a vast, uncaring universe? It's a difficult thing to quantify, but it was a fundamental part of their existence. The hours of your watch eventually pass. You are relieved by the next pair of sailors, their faces pale in the pre-dawn light. You navigate the hammock forest once more, this time with the practiced ease of someone who is beginning to learn the steps of this strange dance. You crawl into your canvas sling, your private island in a sea of snoring men. It sways gently, a cradle in the belly of the beast. For a few more hours, this tiny, 10-foot square patch of air is yours and yours alone. And in the cramped, smelly, public world of the pirate ship, that is the greatest luxury you can imagine. Days turn into weeks. The initial shock of your new life is slowly being replaced by a grudging routine. You're relearning the rhythms of the ship, the faces of the crew, and, most importantly, the intricate power structure that governs this floating society. At the top are two figures who seem to be in a constant, delicate dance of authority, the captain and the quartermaster. You observe the captain first. H.C.S. the man you probably imagined when you thought of a pirate leader. He is decisive, an expert navigator, and a fearsome presence when action is required. He walks the quarterdeck with an air of command, his eye constantly on the horizon, the wind, and the state of the sails. He is the ship's public face and its military commander. When a prize is spotted, it is his voice that rings out, giving the orders to chase, to clear the decks for action, and to fight. In the heat of battle, his authority is absolute. Disobeying a direct order during a chase or a fight is one of the few things that can get you punished on the spot, without a vote. But you soon notice the limits of his power. Once the battle is over and the ship returns to its daily routine, the captain's authority seems to shrink. He doesn't get involved in settling disputes between crew members. He doesn't dole out the food or the grog. He doesn't assign the daily work details. He might offer his opinion, but he can't give an order about these things. HES, more like a modern CEO, who is also the lead salesman essential for bringing in business. but not involved in the day-to-day office management. That role belongs entirely to the quartermaster. He is the man who first read you the ship's articles, and you now see that he is the true center of the ship's daily life. If the captain is the leader, the quartermaster is the manager. He represents the crew's interests. He is elected by them, just like the captain, and his job is to ensure the ship is run fairly and according to the articles everyone signed. You see him arbitrating disputes. Two sailors are arguing over a stolen bit of rope. They don't go to the captain. They go to the quartermaster. He listens to both sides and delivers a judgment that is final. He is the one who leads the boarding party onto a captured ship to assess the loot. He catalogs everything of value, from cannons and cargo down to the personal effects of the captured crew. This is a critical role to prevent looting and arguments. He holds the plunder in trust until it can be fairly divided. And it is the quartermaster, not the captain, who doles out the daily rations of food and water, and the all-important measure of grog. He is the keeper of the ship's resources. This division of power is one of the most fascinating and unique aspects of pirate society. It was a system of checks and balances, designed to prevent any one man from accumulating too much power, a direct reaction to the tyrannical captains of the merchant service and the Royal Navy. The captain had the power to lead them to wealth, but the quartermaster had the power to ensure that wealth was managed and distributed fairly. A little-known fact about this relationship is that the quartermaster often had the right to select which part of the plunder he wanted for himself after the shares were allocated. This was a significant perk and a sign of his respected status. Furthermore, on many ships, if the crew decided to depose a captain, the quartermaster would often act as the interim captain until a new one could be elected. The academic debate surrounding this power structure is lively. Some historians see it as a genuinely radical form of early democracy, a floating commonwealth where the common man had real power. They argue it was a conscious political experiment. Other historians take a more pragmatic view. They argue that this system wasn't born out of lofty political ideals, but out of sheer necessity. A pirate crew was a volatile collection of desperate men. The only way to keep them from turning on each other was to create a system that was perceived as fair. The quartermaster was the guarantor of that fairness. Without him, the ship would quickly descend into anarchy. You watch the two men on deck, the captain, staring out at the sea, planning the next move, the quartermaster, deep in conversation with the cook about the state of the salt beef supply. They rarely give each other orders. They coexist, each ruling their own domain. One manages the ship's external affairs, the hunt. The other manages its internal affairs, the society. It's a delicate balance, a partnership that defines your world, and you realize that your vote, the one you earned by signing the articles, is what gives both of them their power. They serve at the pleasure of the crew. It's a fragile, dangerous, but undeniably empowering system, unlike anything you have ever known. One evening, as the sun bleeds across the horizon, the call goes out for a full crew assembly on the main deck. It's not for a work detail or a meal. It's for a vote. This is your first time participating in the famed pirate democracy you were promised when you signed the articles. The issue at hand is simple. A dispute has arisen over the ship's course. The captain wants to head south, towards the lucrative but dangerous shipping lanes off the coast of Spanish America. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. The potential prizes are rich galleons carrying silver, but the waters are patrolled by Spanish warships, and the weather can be treacherous. A significant portion of the crew, however, led by a grizzled, influential old sailor, wants to head east, towards the West African coast. The prizes there are less spectacular, mostly slave ships and merchant vessels, carrying ivory or gold dust, but the naval presence is weaker. And it's a more reliable hunting ground. It's the safer, more conservative play. The debate begins. It's not a structured, formal affair. Men gather in clumps on the deck, the lantern light catching the earnest, angry, or thoughtful expressions on their faces. The captain makes his case first. He speaks of glory, of one big score that could set them all up for life. He has charisma. and his words paint a vivid picture of silver bars stacked in the hold. Then the old sailor speaks. His voice is quieter, less dramatic. He talks not of glory, but of practicality. He reminds the crew of their dwindling water supply, of the barnacles slowing the ship, and of the last time a pirate crew took on a Spanish warship and was never seen again. He speaks of steady, reliable profits over a risky gamble. Now, you get your say, and so does every other man on the ship, from the most seasoned fighter to the boy who helps the cook. You can speak your mind if you choose, or you can just listen. The quartermaster presides over the affair, not as a judge, but as a moderator, ensuring everyone who wants to speak gets a turn. It's messy, loud, and passionate. After everyone has had their say, it's time for the vote. There are no paper ballots here. The method is simple and public. The quartermaster might propose a motion, like all those in favor of heading south, step to the starboard side, all those for the African coast, to the port side. Or sometimes it was a simple show of hands, or even a raising of cutlasses. You watch as the crew divides. Men shuffle across the deck, some confidently, others with a moment's hesitation, joining the group that represents their choice. You have to make your own decision. Do you follow the captain's promise of riches, or the old sailor's appeal to caution? You think of your single share as the brutal work and the bad food. The idea of one big score is tempting, but the fear of a Spanish prison or the bottom of the ocean is more real. You walk to the port side, joining the cautious faction. The quartermaster counts the men on each side. The result is close, but the port side has it. The decision is made. The ship will sail for Africa. The captain, who has just been publicly overruled by his own crew, shows no sign of anger or resentment. He simply nods, accepts the decision, and begins shouting orders to the helmsman to alter the course. This is the system. He proposed a plan. The board of directors rejected it, and now he executes their will. This is the pirate democracy in action. But as you watch, you begin to see its true nature. This isn't about abstract ideals of liberty or equality. It's about risk management for a criminal enterprise. The system exists to ensure the shareholders, the crew, have a say in the company's direction, because they are the ones bearing all the risk. A little-known aspect of this democracy is how it applied to battle. The crew would often vote on whether to attack a potential prize. If the vote was to attack, there was no turning back. But if a ship put up a surprisingly strong fight, the crew could, and sometimes did, hold a quick, informal vote on whether to break off the attack. It was a fluid, pragmatic system based on a constant cost-benefit analysis. The academic debate here is fascinating. Was this really democracy, or was it something else? Some scholars call it maritime republicanism. Others argue that calling it democracy is an anachronism, applying a modern political term to a system that was purely about business and survival. They point out that this democracy only extended to the business of piracy. The captain still had absolute authority in a fight, and the quartermaster's word was law in matters of discipline. It was to government. It was a brutally effective management structure for a very unusual business. As the ship turns towards its new heading, you feel a strange sense of ownership. You didn't just follow an order. You helped make the decision. Your voice, the voice of a lowly carpenter turned pirate, mattered. It might be a messy, self-interested, and dangerous form of governance. But for the first time in your life, you are not just a cog in the machine. You are one of its operators. The weeks at sea drag on, and the initial novelty of the ship's democratic structure gives way to the grinding reality of boredom and friction. With dozens of men confined to a small space with little to do but wait for a prize, tempers fray. Minor disputes can easily escalate. This is where you see the other side of the pirate code, not the empowering articles of governance, but the brutal articles of discipline. One afternoon, you witness it firsthand. To crewmen who had been grumbling at each other for days over a gambling debt, gambling was officially forbidden, but often happened in secret, finally come to blows. It's not a dramatic sword fight. It's a clumsy, ugly scuffle of thrown punches and curses near the mainmast. It's over almost as soon as it begins. The quartermaster and several other senior crew members step in. pulling the two men apart. There's no discussion, no trial. They have broken one of the most sacred rules. No fighting on board. The ship is a tinderbox of tension, and physical violence cannot be tolerated, lest it spread like wildfire. The punishment is swift and ritualized. The captain is informed, but he merely observes. This is the quartermaster's domain. The entire crew is summoned to witness. The guilty parties are stripped to the waist and their hands are tied to a grate or a mast. There is a quiet, grim finality to the proceedings. This isn't about anger. It's about order. The quartermaster produces the instrument of punishment, the cat o' nine tails. It's a fearsome-looking whip, not a single lash, but a handle from which 9 knotted cords of tarred rope hang. The cat was a standard disciplinary tool in the Royal Navy, in the pirates, in their typical fashion, adopted it but modified its use. In the Navy, a captain could order a flogging for the slightest infraction, and the number of lashes could be immense. On a pirate ship, the punishment was often decided by the crew, or laid out in the articles. The first man is tied up. He is silent, his face a mask of grim resignation. One of the senior crew members, often the boatswain, is tasked with delivering the lashes. He steps back, swings the cat, and brings it down across the man's back. The sound is sickening. A wet, heavy thud. 9 red welts appear instantly on the man's skin. The man grunts in pain but doesn't cry out. The boatswain delivers another lash, and another. The number of lashes is usually prescribed by the articles, or a quick vote, often a dozen or 2. Enough to be excruciatingly painful and leave permanent scars, but usually not enough to kill or permanently disable a man. A disabled sailor is one less hand to work the ship. After the prescribed number of lashes, the man is cut down. His back is a raw, bloody mess. The ship's surgeon, who might just be the cook or the carpenter with a steady hand, comes forward to treat the wounds. The treatment is as brutal as the punishment. He washes the wounds with salt water or rubs them with brine. This was thought to prevent infection, but the pain must have been unimaginable. Then, the second man receives his punishment. The crew watches in silence. This isn't entertainment. It's a powerful, visual reminder of the rules. It reinforces the authority of the quartermaster and the collective will of the crew. Here's a little known, and rather grim, detail about the cat o' nine tails. The name itself is thought to come from the scratches it left, like those of a cat, to make it even more brutal. Some versions of the cat had small lead weights or sharp pieces of metal woven into the ends of the cords. However, historians still debate how common these more barbaric versions were on pirate ships, where preserving the crew's health was, in a strange way, a priority. An overly brutal punishment regime would be bad for morale and business. The debate among historians on this topic is nuanced. Was pirate discipline more or less brutal than that in the navies of the time? On one hand, punishments like flogging were common in both, but on the other, pirates had a say in when and how it was used. A naval sailor could be flogged at the whim of a single tyrannical captain, while a pirate was usually punished for breaking a rule he had explicitly agreed to. Some historians argue that pirate justice, while harsh, was therefore fairer and more transparent than the arbitrary discipline of the state. Others argue that violence is violence, and life on a pirate ship was just as brutal, simply with a different set of justifications. After the punishment is over, the two men are sent to their hammocks to recover. The mood on the ship is subdued. The incident is over. The message has been sent. The authority of the articles has been upheld in blood. You look at the dark stains being swabbed from the deck and realize that the freedom of pirate life has very sharp and painful edges. It's a democracy, yes, but one that is maintained, when necessary, by the lash, in the quiet hours of the night watch, or during the communal work of mending sails. You hear the older sailors talk. They trade stories, not of treasure, but of punishments. They speak of the lash, of being marooned. And then, in hushed, fearful tones, they mention the ultimate horror, keel hauling. The word itself seems to carry a special dread. The stories describe a punishment so brutal it was reserved for only the most severe offenses, like cowardice in battle or inciting a mutiny against a successful captain. The process as they describe it, is the stuff of nightmares. A rope is rigged from one side of the ship to the other, passing underneath the hull. The condemned man is tied to this rope. He is then thrown overboard on one side of the ship and dragged down. Under the keel, the central spine at the very bottom of the vessel and then hauled up on the other side. If he is lucky, the process is quick, and he only has to endure the terror of being dragged underwater, choking on salt water. But he is rarely lucky. The bottom of a ship that has been at sea for months is not a smooth surface. It's a thriving ecosystem of its own, covered in sharp, rock-hard barnacles, splintered wood, and rough patches of marine growth. As the man is dragged under the ship, his body is scraped, slashed, and torn by this abrasive surface. The barnacle shells act like thousands of tiny knives, shredding his skin and clothes. If he survives the lacerations and the near drowning, he might be hauled up on the other side, a bloody, half-drowned wreck. Often, the punishment would be repeated, dragging him back to the side he started from. Few men were said to survive it. Those who did were often so maimed or brain damaged from lack of oxygen that they were never the same. The sailors speak of it as a uniquely Dutch invention, a punishment of profound cruelty that even the most hardened pirates feared. The image is so powerful, so horrifying, that it has become a staple of pirate lore, a shorthand for the ultimate maritime brutality. But here is where the story gets complicated, and where we step into a major historical debate. Did keel hauling, as described in these terrifying tales, actually happen on pirate ships? The evidence is surprisingly thin. While keel hauling was a very real and officially sanctioned punishment in the Dutch Navy, and perhaps a few other navies, its practice among the pirates of the Golden Age is highly questionable. Despite the thousands of pages of trial records, depositions from captured pirates, and first-hand accounts of life at sea, there are almost no credible, specific accounts of a pirate crew keel hauling one of their own. So why is the myth so persistent? This is the core of the academic argument. Some historians believe it may have happened on rare occasions, and the stories were so horrific that they spread like wildfire, becoming part of the general mythology of the sea. It was a potent bogeyman story, used to keep unruly sailors in line. Other historians argue that it was largely a fantasy, a piece of anti-pirate propaganda. Stories of keel hauling were popular on land because they reinforced the image of pirates as inhuman monsters. It was a tale that civilized folk loved to tell to shudder at the barbarity of the outlaws at sea. It's possible that pirates themselves perpetuated the myth to enhance their fearsome reputation. A little-known fact that complicates the picture is the sheer physics of it. On a larger ship, the time it would take to drag a man under the hull would almost certainly lead to drowning, making it less a punishment and more a particularly gruesome method of execution. On a smaller, shallower draft vessel like a sloop, it might be survivable, but still incredibly dangerous. From a practical pirate perspective, it was a bad idea. It risked killing a valuable crew member, or injuring him so badly that he became a liability. Pirates were brutal, but they were also pragmatic businessmen. A flogging or marooning served the purpose of punishment and deterrence, without necessarily destroying a valuable asset. So, as you listen to the old sailor's story, his eyes wide in the lantern light, you are caught between the visceral terror of the tale and the quiet, logical doubts. Is he repeating a story he heard from a friend of a friend? Is he exaggerating to scare the new recruits like you? Or did he once, long ago, witness something like it? The truth is likely lost to the sea. The story of keel hauling serves as a powerful reminder of how pirate history has been built. It's a mixture of hard fact, folklore, and deliberate myth-making. The pirates' reality was grim enough, but the legends that grew around them were often even darker. Keel hauling exists in that murky space between a real historical practice and a powerful, enduring legend. It's a word that tastes like fear, salt, and blood, whether any pirate of your era ever truly experienced it or not. The ship has been at sea for what feels like an eternity. The food is getting worse, the water fouler, and the mood on board is turning sour. The failure to find a prize is making the men restless and paranoid. It is in this tense atmosphere that a new crime is uncovered. It's not a fight, but something considered far worse. Theft. One of the crew, a quiet man you barely knew, is caught stealing, not from the ship's general stores, but from another crewman's personal bag a few silver coins. The man's entire share from the last prize months ago. The theft is a profound violation of the trust that holds this fragile society together. On a ship where every man's life depends on the others, stealing from a brother is the ultimate betrayal. There is no lengthy trial. The evidence is clear. The quartermaster convenes a swift assembly, and the verdict is unanimous. The punishment for this crime, as laid out in the articles you all sign, is not a flogging. It's not a quick execution. It's something quieter, and in many ways, more terrible. The thief is to be marooned. The captain alters course, and a day later, a small, nameless speck of an island appears on the horizon. It's exactly the kind of place you've been trained to avoid. A tiny mound of sand and rock, perhaps with a few scrubby palm trees, surrounded by reefs that make it a hazard to navigation. It's a place no ship would ever visit intentionally. This will be the thief's new home, and his prison. The crew works in grim silence as a small longboat is lowered into the water. The condemned man is brought to the rail. He doesn't struggle or plead. He seems to be in a state of shock, his face pale and empty. He knows what's coming. The quartermaster, acting as the executor of the crew's will, hands the man his parting gifts. A standard package prescribed by pirate tradition. He is given a single flask of fresh water, a cutlass, and a pistol. And here's the most chilling part of the ritual. The pistol is loaded with only a single shot and a single ball of powder. The meaning is clear. The water will last him a day or two. The cutlass might help him open a coconut, if he can find one. But the pistol and the single shot are for when the loneliness and the hopelessness become too much to bear. It is not an act of mercy. It's a final, psychological torment, the constant, tempting offer of a quick way out. The man is put into the longboat, and a few sailors row him towards the shore. You watch from the deck as the small boat navigates the reef and deposits the lone figure on the white sand. He doesn't look back. The longboat returns, is hauled back aboard, and the ship turns back to the open sea. Within an hour, the island is just a smudge on the horizon. Within two, it's gone completely. You are left with the silence and the profound sense of what you've just witnessed. You haven't just punished a thief. You've erased a man from your world, sentencing him to a slow, lonely death. He will die of thirst, of starvation, or, if a chewing, a swaki from his own hand. A strange and little-known fact about marooning is that it wasn't always a death sentence. The famous pirate Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, once deliberately marooned a portion of his own crew on a sandbar after a shipwreck, possibly to increase his own share of the remaining treasure. They were reportedly rescued a few days later. The most famous real-life castaway associated with pirates was Alexander Selkirk, a Scottish sailor who was voluntarily left on an island after a dispute with his captain. His story of survival for over 3 years became the inspiration for the novel Robinson Crusoe. The historical debate here centers on the purpose of marooning. Was it purely a punishment, a convenient way to get rid of a troublemaker without the messiness of an execution on board? Or did it serve a more symbolic purpose? Some historians argue that it was the ultimate expression of the pirate code. By stealing from his brother, the thief had broken the social contract. His punishment was to be cast out of society itself, to be rendered utterly alone. It was a fate that every sailor, living in the forced community of a crowded ship, feared above all else. To be alone was to be dead. As the ship sails on, an unspoken tension is lifted. The air, however grim, has served its purpose. The crew's anger has been vented. The rules have been reinforced, and the sanctity of shared property has been restored. But the memory of the man on the beach lingers. You look out at the empty ocean and realize that the greatest danger on this ship isn't a naval patrol or a storm. It's the risk of being cast out, of being left behind, of having the world you know simply sail away and leave you with nothing but a pistol and one last terrible choice to make. The man who was flogged a few weeks ago is not getting better. The wounds on his back, despite the brutal salt water cleansing, have become infected. They are festering. Angry red and yellow sores that is a foul-smelling liquid. Has fallen into a fever, and his bunk has been moved to a slightly more isolated corner of the deck. Though in this crowded space, true quarantine is impossible. It's time to call the surgeon. But when the call goes out, it's not a clean aproned, educated man who responds. It's the ship's carpenter. On this ship, and on many pirate vessels, the roles of carpenter and surgeon were combined. The logic, in a grim way, made sense. Both jobs required a steady hand, a strong stomach, and a deep familiarity with saws, drills, and blades. If a man could neatly saw off a piece of wood, the thinking went, he could probably saw off a limb. The surgeon arrives with his medical kit. It's not a leather bag of polished steel instruments. It's a wooden toolbox, the same one he uses to mend the mast. Inside, nestled amongst the wood shavings, are the tools of his trade, a variety of saws, some for wood, some for bone, a set of knives and chisels, not much different from his woodworking tools, a terrifying-looking drill, used for boring holes in skulls to relieve pressure, and a branding iron nor a pot of tar, used for cauterizing wounds. Everything is stained, and nothing is sterile. The very concept of germs and sterilization is centuries away. He examines the sick man's back. His diagnosis is simple and blunt. The flesh is rotten. It must be cut away. There is no anesthetic, save for a large swig of raw rum given to the patient, which serves more to dull his senses than to kill the pain. Two other crewmen are called over to hold the man down. You watch, morbidly fascinated and horrified, as the carpenter surgeon goes to work. He takes one of his sharper knives and begins to cut away the infected tissue. The sick man screams, the raw, animal sound of pure agony that is quickly muffled by the hands of the men holding him down. The surgeon works with a detached, practical air, like HES carving a piece of rotten wood from a beam. He scrapes the wound clean down to the healthy flesh, then calls for the tar pot, the pot of black, bubbling tar is brought from the galley. The surgeon takes a spatula, dips it in the tar, and slaps it directly onto the open wound. The man convulses, and the horrifying smell of burning flesh fills the air for a moment. The tar seals the wound, stopping the bleeding in. It was hoped, preventing further infection by creating a waterproof barrier. It is a brutal, agonizing, but sometimes effective, last resort. This scene, as horrific as it is, was the reality of pirate medicine. And here's a bizarre but true fact. The most sought-after medical professional for a pirate crew to capture was not a physician, but a surgeon from a captured ship. Physicians of the era dealt mostly with internal medicine, theories of humors, and prescribing potions. Surgeons were the ones who knew how to deal with the physical trauma that was common on a ship: broken bones, deep cuts, and the signature injury of the age of sail, amputation. If a man's or more leg was shattered by a cannonball or piece of shrapnel, amputation was often the only option to prevent a slow death from gangrene. The ship's surgeon would perform the operation in minutes, tying off the limb, sawing through the bone, and then cauterizing the stump with hot tar or branding iron. The speed of the operation was the key to survival. The debate among medical historians is just how successful these rough-and-ready amputees were. The survival rate was likely very low, but it was better than the certain death of infection. Many of the iconic images of pirates with a wooden leg or a hook for a hand were not fantasy. They were the walking evidence of those who had survived the surgeon's saw. You look at the feverish man, now mercifully passed out from the pain. The carpenter wipes his knife on a rag and puts it back in his toolbox. His job is done. Whether the man lives or dies now is up to his own constitution and a great deal of luck. You realize that on the ship. A simple infection from a splinter, a cut, or a flogging is a potential death sentence. The greatest threats are not the grand battles, but the small, unseen enemies. A rusty nail, a festering wound, a surgeon whose primary skill is building shelves. The fear of injury is not just the fear of pain. It's the fear of being handed over to the man with the saw and the tarpaulin. It adds another layer of grim reality to the pirate life, a constant, low-level terror that the swashbuckling myths always leave out. The ship drifts in the doldrums, a patch of ocean near the equator where the winds die completely. The sails hang limp, the sea is like a sheet of oily glass, and the sun is a merciless, white-hot eye in the sky. The heat is oppressive, but a different, colder fear is beginning to spread through the crew. It's a slow, creeping sickness, one that doesn't come from a wound or a fever. It starts in the mouth. One of the older sailors complains that his gums are sore and spongy. They bleed when he tries to chew his hardtack. You dismiss it as just another misery of his life. But then you notice your own gums feel tender. A few days later, the old sailor shows you his teeth. They are loose in their sockets. He can wiggle them with his tongue. This is the beginning of scurvy. It's not a disease in the conventional sense, caused by a virus or bacteria. It's a disease of absence, a systemic collapse of the body due to a profound lack of vitamin C. Your diet of hardtack and salted meat contains none of it. Your body, deprived of this essential nutrient, is beginning to fall apart. The symptoms are insidious and terrifying. After the sore gums and loose teeth, lethargy sets in. You feel an exhaustion so deep that even the simplest task feels monumental. Your joints ache, a deep, throbbing pain in your bones. Then come the spots. Small, dark purple and black spots begin to appear on your skin, particularly on your legs and arms. They are caused by spontaneous bleeding under the skin as your capillaries become fragile and break down. And then comes one of the most bizarre and psychologically terrifying symptoms of advanced scurvy. Old, long-healed wounds begin to reopen. A scar from a knife fight years ago might start to ache, then split open as if the injury were fresh. Bones that were broken and mended in the past can, according to some historical accounts, spontaneously re-break. It's as if the body is forgetting how to hold itself together. Its history of trauma re-emerging on the surface. You see it happening around you. Men who were strong and capable a month ago are now weak and listless. Their faces pale, their breaths foul. They lie in their hammocks, too tired to move, their teeth falling out into their hands. The ship is turning into a floating hospital, or rather, a hospice, as there is no cure on board. This brings us to a strange and little-known aspect of scurvy, its effect on the mind. In addition to the physical decay, scurvy often brought on a profound depression and lethargy. Men would become sullen, despondent, and in some cases, delirious. It was just a physical sickness. It was a psychological plague. For centuries, the cause of scurvy was a complete mystery. Theories abounded. Some thought it was caused by the foul sea air, others by laziness, or even by a form of contagious despair. The cure was eventually discovered by naval surgeons like James Lind in the mid-18th century, who conducted one of the first ever clinical trials, proving that citrus fruits could cure the disease. But this knowledge spread slowly, and for the pirates of the Golden Age, scurvy remained a mysterious and terrifying killer. They knew from experience that fresh fruit and vegetables could help, which is why ending on a tropical island and gorging on fruit was a cause for celebration. But they didn't understand the underlying science. The historical debate here revolves around the sheer impact of the disease. Some historians argue that scurvy, not naval battles or storms, was the single greatest killer of sailors in the Age of Sail, claiming more lives than all other causes combined. It's a hidden plague that shaped maritime history in profound ways. Voyages had to be planned around the availability of fresh supplies. Ships were often unforced to sail with only a fraction of their crew able to work. A ship full of score but icy sailors was an easy target for any healthy attacker. You look at your own hands, pressing on your gums. They are tender. Is it your imagination, or is that a new ache in your knee? The fear of scurvy is different from the fear of a flogging or a battle. It's not a sharp, immediate terror. It's a slow, creeping dread. It's the fear of your own body betraying you, of dissolving from the inside out. The captain and the quartermaster know they are in a race against time. They must find land, any land with fresh green things growing on it. or the entire crew will perish. The hunt for a prize is forgotten. The new treasure they seek is not gold, but a simple fruit, a handful of green leaves, anything that can halt this slow, inexorable decay. Your pirate adventure has become a desperate, floating search for a cure to a disease you don't even have a name for, as if the slow, internal rot of scurvy was enough. Another, faster-moving enemy begins to stalk the ship. It starts with one man, then two, then a dozen, all struck down by a violent illness. They are gripped by severe stomach cramps, a raging fever, and a debilitating, watery diarrhea. This is dysentery, or as the sailors called it, the bloody flux. It spreads through the crew with terrifying speed, a testament to the ship's abysmal sanitation. The disease is transmitted through contaminated food and water, a near certainty. Given your diet of weevil-infested biscuits and slimy water from the casks, the single, public head at the bow of the ship becomes a revolving door of sick men, further spreading the contagion. The ship transforms into a scene of misery. The groans of men in agony are a constant sound. The already foul smell of the ship is now mixed with the specific, acrid stench of sickness. Men are too weak to get out of their hammocks, soiling themselves in the decks below. The few healthy crew members, like yourself, are run ragged, trying to manage the ship while also tending to the sick. Your duties now include tasks you never imagined. You carry buckets of human waste to be dumped overboard. You try to spoon water between the cracked lips of men who are so dehydrated their skin has lost all elasticity. You see the life draining out of them, their bodies withered by the relentless fluid loss. There is no medicine. There is nothing the carpenter-surgeon can do with his saw or tarpaulin. The only treatment is to wait, to hope the man's constitution is strong enough to fight it off. Many are not. This environment of filth and disease is a breeding ground for more than just dysentery. Fevers of all kinds sweep through the crew. Ship fever, likely typhus spread by the lice that infest your clothes and bedding, causes high fevers, delirium, and a telltale rash. Yellow fever, carried by mosquitoes that might have come aboard during your last brief stop for water, turns the skin a ghastly yellow and can cause victims to vomit black blood. Your world shrinks to a floating infirmary. The work of sailing becomes secondary to the work of survival. The healthy few struggle to handle the sails and steer the ship, their movements slow with exhaustion and fear. Every cough, every stomach gurgle from a crew mate sends a jolt of anxiety through you. And why next? Here's a little known, and rather grim, medical detail from this era. The distinction between all these different fevers and fluxes was not well understood. Most illnesses were simply diagnosed by their primary symptom. You had a fever or a flux. As a result, treatments were haphazard and often based on superstition or flawed medical theories, like the balancing of humors. A common cure for fever was bloodletting, performed by the surgeon, which likely only weakened the patient further, hastening their death. The historical debate on this topic centers on the mortality rates. Just how many pirates died from disease versus combat? While precise numbers are impossible to come by, the consensus among maritime historians is that it's not even close. For every pirate killed by a cannonball or a cutlass, dozens, perhaps even hundreds, succumb to the invisible enemies of dysentery, typhus, scurvy, and yellow fever. The true terrors of the sea were microscopic. The skull and crossbones flag was an apt symbol, not just for the violent pirates dealt out, but for the constant presence of death that haunted their own ships. You step carefully across the deck, avoiding a patch of filth. You look at the faces of the sick men, their eyes glassy and unfocused. These were the same men who rode it on the ship's course, who were promised a share of immense riches. Now, their only desire is a sip of clean water, an end to the cramping in their gut. The romantic image of the pirate as a robust, rebellious adventurer, thriving in his freedom, shatters completely. You see them now for what they are: poor, malnourished men, trapped in an unsanitary wooden box, being systematically wiped out by diseases they cannot understand or fight. The ship is no longer a vessel of plunder. It's a plague ship, drifting aimlessly, its crew more concerned with their bowels than with any potential prize on the horizon. Your chances of survival, you realize with a cold certainty, have less to do with your fighting skills and more to do with the strength of your immune system. Miraculously, you so far avoided the worst of the scurvy and the flux. Perhaps your constitution is stronger, or maybe you've just been lucky, because you are one of the few relatively healthy and able-bodied men left. You are given one of the most important, and most mind-numbingly boring, jobs on the ship, lookout duty. The journey to your post is an ordeal in itself. You have to climb the rigging, the complex web of ropes and lines that supports the mainmast. You move slowly, your hands and feet finding the familiar footholds in the rope ladders known as rat lines. The ship sways beneath you, and with every roll, you are swung out over the churning water, then back and again. A fall from this height would mean certain death. Your destination is a small platform or basket near the very top of the mast, called the crow's nest. It's a small, exposed perch, barely big enough for one person. As you settle in, the world expands. From here, you can see for miles in every direction. The ship below you looks like a toy, the men on deck like tiny insects. The view is breathtaking, a vast panorama of blue sea meeting blue sky. And then, the boredom sets in. Your job is to stare at that panorama. You are to scan the horizon, constantly, in a slow, 360-degree sweep, looking for any anomaly, the telltale sign of a sail, a smudge of smoke, a piece of floating wreckage, anything. You are the eyes of the ship, the first line of defense and the first to spot a potential victim. But for hours, there is nothing, absolutely nothing. The sea is a vast, empty expanse. The sun beats down on you, and the wind is a constant, lonely whistle in your ears. There is nothing to do but look. The sheer monotony is a physical weight. Your eyes start to burn from the sun's glare on the water. You fight off a hypnotic daze, the temptation to let your gaze go unfocused. A moment of inattention could mean missing the one thing you are up here to find. To pass the time, you might sing quietly to yourself or trace the patterns of the waves. You watch the seabirds as they glide on the air currents. You feel the rhythm of the ship in a new way. The slow, ponderous rocking of the masthead, a much wider and more sickening arc than the motion you feel on the deck. Many new sailors get seasick for the first time in the crow's nest. This is the unglamorous reality behind every dramatic movie scene where the lookout shouts "sail ho." For every one of those exciting moments, there were thousands of hours of absolute, soul-crushing boredom. Weeks, even months, could pass without a single sighting. And here's a quirky little fact about lookout duty. How did they communicate with the deck? Shouting from that height, especially in a strong wind, was unreliable. Many ships developed a system of signals. A certain number of rings on a bell might indicate a sail spotted, with the direction given by pointing, or they might use a speaking tube, a long canvas, or leather to burning down the mast. Though these were rare and often damaged, more often than not, it was just a powerful, practiced shout, honed by years of trying to be heard over a gale. The historical debate here is a subtle one, focusing on the psychology of the lookout. What did this constant, lonely vigilance do to a man's mind? Some historians suggest it fostered a unique kind of perception, an ability to read the water and the sky in ways a landlubber could never comprehend. They learned to distinguish between a distant wave and a sail, between a cloud on the horizon and the smoke from a ship's chimney. Others argue that the intense boredom and isolation could lead to a form of madness, with lookouts reporting phantom ships or becoming lost in daydreams, making them unreliable. It's likely that both were true. The best lookouts were a special breed, men with immense patience and incredibly sharp eyes. After what feels like a lifetime, but is probably only 2 hours, you see another sailor begin the long climb up the rigging to relieve you. Your watch is over. You climb down, your legs and arms stiff, your eyes aching. You are relieved to be back on the solid deck, back in the world of men, even if it is a world of sickness and squalor. You have spent your entire watch staring at nothing. You have contributed nothing tangible to the ship's progress, but your duty was vital. The ship is blind without its lookout. You were a living sensor, a human telescope, scanning the void for a sign of salvation or damnation. And tomorrow, if you are still healthy, You will climb that mast and do it all over again. The pirate's life, you are learning, is not a life of constant action, but a life of endless, excruciating waiting. Then, one afternoon, the monotony is shattered, the lookout's shout, hoarse and cracked from the wind, carries down to the deck. Sail ho! The words act like an electric jolt. The listless, sickly crew is galvanized into a flurry of purposeful activity. Men who were just moments ago slumped over a barrel, mending a rope with dull eyes, now scramble to their posts. The captain is on the quarterdeck, a spyglass pressed to his eye. The quartermaster is barking orders, his voice cutting through the sudden energy. The captain confirms the sighting. It's a merchant ship, a fat, slow-moving vessel, sitting low in the water, a sign that its hold is full. It appears to be sailing alone, without a naval escort. It's the perfect target, the one they have been waiting for months. The order is given to give chase, and this is where you learn that a pirate chase is not the frantic, cannon-blazing affair you've seen in movies. It is a slow, methodical, and deeply strategic game of nautical chess. It is a contest of skill, patience, and, above all, the wind, the sails, which you have spent countless hours patching and mending, are now the ship's engine. The crew swarms into the rigging, climbing with a speed and agility that belies their poor health. They unfurl every possible scrap of canvas, the topsails, the royals, even the studding sails or stunsails, which are extra sails set on booms extending from the main yards. The goal is to catch every last whisper of wind. The captain is in his element now, a master of his craft. He is not just sailing towards the target. He is reading the wind and the water, trying to anticipate what the other captain will do. He might steer a course that seems indirect, aiming to get upwind of the prey, which gives him a critical tactical advantage, allowing him to dictate the terms of the engagement. Hours pass. The chase is agonizingly slow. The other ship is now a clear shape on the horizon, but it feels no closer. Your ship and its prey are to pieces on a vast blue board, their speed dictated by the fickle whims of the breeze. A sudden lull in the wind could end the chase. A sudden squall could change everything. To try and gain an edge, the crew engages in a bit of obscure, but common, maritime practice. They wet the sails. Buckets of seawater are hauled up and thrown onto the canvas. The idea is that the water tightens the weave of the sailcloth, making it less porous and thus able to catch more of the wind's power. It's a small thing, but in a race this slow, every tiny advantage counts. And here's a quirky little superstition from the age of sail. If the wind was failing, some sailors would engage in a form of sympathetic magic. They might start whistling, believing it would summon the wind. Others might stick a knife in the mast, pointing in the direction they wanted the wind to come from. The most desperate might even try to buy wind from an old sailor who was believed to have a special connection to the elements. These practices were officially discouraged, but unofficially tolerated. When you're in the middle of the ocean with limp sails, you'll try anything. The historical debate here concerns the technical skill of pirate crews. Were they genuinely superior sailors to those in the navies or merchant services? The traditional view, often romanticized, is that pirates were the best sailors in the world, mavericks who could get more speed out of a ship than anyone. A more modern and nuanced view suggests that while many pirates were, indeed highly skilled, many were former naval or merchant sailors. Their real advantage lay in their ships and their motivation. Pirates often favored smaller, faster, more maneuverable vessels like sloops and schooners, which were better suited for chasing and fleeing than the lumbering galleons or ships of the line. Furthermore, a pirate crew was fighting for their direct profit. Their motivation to sail hard and take risks was arguably much higher than that of a poorly paid, press-ganged naval crew. The sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the water. The merchant ship is closer now, close enough to make out the details of its rigging. The tension on board your ship is palpable. The exhaustion and sickness are forgotten, replaced by a focused, predatory energy. The chase has taken all day. It has been a test of endurance, a trial of patience and sailing skill. The fight hasn't even begun, but the most critical phase of the battle is almost over. By outsailing their opponent, the pirates have already stacked the odds in their favor. The impending battle will not be a fair fight. It will be the swift, brutal conclusion to a long, slow, and masterfully executed hunt. As your ship closes the final distance to the merchantman, the atmosphere on deck transforms. The quiet focus of the chase explodes into controlled chaos. The captain's voice, which had been calm and measured, is now a sharp, commanding roar. The order is given, clear for action. This is not a signal for men to draw their swords. It is a command to fundamentally reconfigure the ship for combat. The gun deck, where you and the other men sleep, is instantly transformed. Hammocks are unhooked, rolled, and stuffed into nets along the ship's rails. These hammock nettings serve a dual purpose. They clear the space for the cannons and, it was believed, could help absorb the impact of incoming small arms fire and deadly wood splinters. Everyday clutter barrels, crates, spare lines is either secured or thrown overboard. The decks are doused with water again, not to tighten the sails this time, but to prevent fires from stray sparks and to make the planks less slippery from the inevitable blood. Sand is scattered on top to provide better footing. You are assigned to a cannon crew. A typical cannon requires a team of 4 to 6 men to operate. Your job might be to worm the barrel, using a long corkscrew-like tool to pull out any leftover smoldering bits from the previous shot. Or you might be the one who swabs the barrel with a wet sponge to extinguish any remaining sparks before the next bag of gunpowder is rammed home. Or perhaps you're one of the men who uses heavy ropes and tackles to haul the massive cannon back into position after it recoils violently from a shot. The gun captain, a veteran with years of experience, directs your small team with sharp, clipped commands. The process is a dangerous, choreographed dance. A single mistake, a stray spark, a premature firing could kill the entire gun crew. The first shot is fired, not from your main cannons, but from the smaller chaser guns at the bow. It's a warning shot, fired across the merchantman's bow. The goal of a pirate attack is not to sink the other ship. A sunken ship means no plunder. The goal is to intimidate the crew into surrendering without a fight. A quick, bloodless takeover is the ideal outcome for everyone. Sometimes, this is enough. The merchant captain, seeing he is outgunned and outmaneuvered, strikes his colors, lowering his flag in a sign of surrender. But this time, the merchantman is stubborn. A puff of smoke erupts from its side, and a cannonball screams past your mast, trailing a terrifying whistle. They are going to fight back. Now the real battle begins. Your captain gives the order to fire a full broadside. The gun captain on your team waits for the uproll of the ship, shouts fire, and touches a hot poker to the touch hole of the cannon. There is a deafening, concussive roar that you feel in your bones. The cannon leaps backwards, restrained by thick ropes, and the deck fills with thick, acrid, sulphurous smoke. For a moment, you are completely blind and deaf, your world reduced to the ringing in your ears and the stench of gunpowder. You look towards the other ship and see the result of your volley. The primary targets were not the hull, but the rigging and the deck. The aim is to disable, not destroy. You see their mainmast splintered, their sails torn and tangled. And this is where the single greatest danger in a naval battle comes from. It's not the cannonballs themselves. The real killer is wood. When a cannonball smashes into the wooden hull or mast of a ship, it sends thousands of dagger-like splinters, from tiny shards to massive, spear-sized chunks, flying across the deck. These wooden projectiles could impale a man, take off a limb, or cause horrific, ragged wounds. More sailors work ill or maimed by these splinters than by direct hits from cannonballs. This is a gruesome fact that the clean sword fights of movies never show you. The historical debate here is about the nature of pirate combat. Was it the swashbuckling, sword-swinging affair of popular imagination? The evidence suggests that prolonged, dramatic duels were rare. Most pirate battles were short, brutal, and one-sided. Pirates held all the advantages. They chose their targets. They usually had more men, and their goal was psychological warfare. They cultivated a terrifying reputation. Their flags, their war cries, and their overwhelming numbers were all designed to make the other crew give up before a real fight was necessary. The chaos, noise, and splintering wood of the initial cannonade was often enough to break the will of a merchant crew. Your ship pulls alongside the crippled merchantman. Grappling hooks are thrown, binding the two ships together. The pirates, led by the quartermaster, swarm over the rails, screaming and firing their pistols. The fight on deck, if there is one, is usually brief and chaotic. It's a messy, frightening scrum of noise and confusion. Over in minutes, the merchant crew, seeing their ship disabled and their decks filled with screaming, heavily armed men, quickly throw down their weapons and surrender. The battle is over. The chaotic noise of the brief battle fades, replaced by the business-like hum of acquisition. The fight was the easy part. Now comes the real work. The quartermaster, who led the boarding party, is now in charge of the prize. His first priority is to secure the captured crew and identify anyone with valuable skills: a surgeon, a carpenter, a cooper, who might be persuaded to join your ranks. The rest are confined under guard. Then, the assessment of the loot begins. And this is where your grand fantasies of pirate treasure, chests overflowing with gold doubloons, and glittering jewels collide with a much more mundane reality. The quartermaster, with a few trusted men, goes through the ship's cargo manifest and inspects the whole. You and the rest of the crew are kept busy on your own ship, patching the rigging, clearing the cannons, and waiting with a rising sense of anticipation. After what feels like an eternity, the quartermaster returns. He calls an assembly on deck and announces the haul. There is no treasure chest. The merchant ship was carrying not silver, but barrels of flour, casks of wine, and boats of cloth. It was also carrying a large shipment of sugar and tobacco. A collective groan might triple through some of the newer crew members. Flour, cloth. This isn't the stuff of legend, but the veteran pirates know better. While not as glamorous as gold, this is a good haul. These are commodities. They have real, practical value. The flour means you'll have fresh biscuits for a while. The wine is a welcome change from the stale water and harsh grog. The cloth can be used to patch sails or be fashioned into new clothes. And the sugar and tobacco are valuable trade goods that can be sold for a handsome profit in a friendly, or at least corrupt, port. This is the reality of most pirate plunder. It was treasure. It was cargo. The most successful pirates were not just thieves. They were shrewd, unsentimental commodity brokers. Now comes the most important ritual, the division of the spoils. This is done strictly according to the ship's articles. The total value of the cargo is estimated. Then, any special payments are taken out from the top. This includes the compensation for the men who were injured in the attack. One man lost an eye to a wood splinter. He will get his 100 pieces of 8, or the equivalent value in goods, before anyone else gets a penny. This is the pirate insurance plan in action. After the injury fund is set aside, the remaining plunder is divided into shares. As a carpenter, you are entitled to your 1 1/4 shares. The quartermaster oversees the division with meticulous care. He knows that any hint of unfairness could lead to a mutiny. A strange and little-known detail of this process is how non-monetary goods were divided. Sometimes, the goods themselves would be split up. You might literally receive a bolt of cloth, a small keg of wine, and a sack of sugar as your share. Other times, the entire cargo would be sold at the next port, and the cash proceeds would be divided, the most common method, especially for very valuable or indivisible items, was an auction. The quartermaster would hold up a captured item, a fancy pistol, a silver candlestick. A fine coat, and the crew would bid on it, using their future shares as currency. The winning bid would then be deducted from that man's eventual payout. It was a fair, transparent, and surprisingly sophisticated way to liquidate assets. The historical debate here focuses on the actual wealth of the average pirate. Was it a lucrative profession? The romantic myths suggests every pirate was rich. The reality, historians argue, was far different. While a few famous captains, like Black Bellamy, did capture immense fortunes, the average pirate's career was shortened, his earnings meager. After months of risk and deprivation, a single share from a typical prize might only amount to a few dozen pounds, enough to live like a king for a few weeks, but hardly a lifetime of wealth. For most, piracy was not a get-rich-quick scheme. It was a desperate gamble that rarely paid off in the long run. The division is complete. You have your share. It's not a chest of gold, but it's more tangible wealth than you've ever held in your hands at one time. There's a sense of satisfaction and vindication. The system where you risked your life, and you have been rewarded. Just as the articles promised, the mood on the ship is lighter than it has been in months. The sickness and boredom are forgotten, washed away by the promise of fresh food and the jingle of future coin. But as you look at your modest pile of goods, you can't help but do the mental math. Months of hell for this. It's a sobering calculation. With the prize secured and the loot distributed, a new destination is announced, and a wave of genuine excitement ripples through the crew. You are heading for a friendly port, not a respectable, lawful city, but a pirate haven. A place like Nassau on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, which for a brief, glorious period in the early 18th century was the heart of a pirate republic. As your ship navigates the turquoise waters and drops anchor in the bustling harbor, the change in atmosphere is intoxicating. After months of confinement on your floating wooden prison, the sights, sounds, and smells of land are overwhelming. The harbor is a forest of masts from other pirate ships, flying their notorious flags in open defiance of the world's navies. The shore is a chaotic collection of ramshackle wooden huts, taverns, and warehouses. The moment your feet touch the sandy ground, the strict discipline of the ship dissolves completely. The carefully managed, democratic society you've been living in evaporates into a frenzy of individual indulgence. The shares of plunder that were so meticulously divided are now ready to be spent with reckless abandon. Your first stop is a tavern. It's a dark, smoky, and incredibly loud place, filled with pirates from a dozen different crews. They are drinking, gambling, singing, and telling exaggerated stories of their exploits. The air is thick with the sweet smell of tobacco smoke and spilled rum. You and your crewmates, who have been living on watered-down grog for months, now have access to seemingly unlimited quantities of alcohol. The money flows like water. Men who were just days ago living in squalor are now throwing coins on the table, buying rounds of drinks for complete strangers. They are gambling away their hard-won shares in games of cards and dice, the very activities that were strictly forbidden on the ship. The pragmatic, long-term thinking of the sea is replaced by a desperate, short-term hedonism. This is the pirate binge economy in full swing. The goal is not to save or invest the money. The goal is to spend it as quickly and as loudly as possible. Why? Because everyone knows this shore leave is temporary. Death is a constant companion in your line of work. You could be killed in the next battle, hang from a naval yardar, or die of a fever. Hoarding wealth makes no sense in a world where you might not have a future. The pleasure is in the spending, in the fleeting feeling of being a king for a day. And here's a quirky detail about these pirate havens. They were surprisingly multicultural and, in some ways, egalitarian. In a tavern in Nassau, you would see sailors of all nationalities and races drinking together. A significant percentage of many pirate crews were men of African descent, both former slaves and free men, who found a level of freedom and equality on a pirate ship that was unimaginable anywhere else in the world. Unsure, at least for a while. The only thing that mattered was the coin in your pocket. The historical debate surrounding these pirates' sanctuaries is fascinating. Workplaces like Nass are genuine republics, with a coherent political ideology of rebellion against the tyranny of empires. This is the Pirates of the Caribbean view, a romantic notion of a libertarian utopia. Or were they simply temporary, chaotic boomtowns, driven by the economics of crime and vice? Most historians lean towards the latter, pragmatic view. They argue that these havens thrive not because of ideology, but because they were convenient, lawless places for pirates to refit their ships, recruit new men, and, most importantly, sell their stolen goods. Local merchants and corrupt officials were more than happy to turn a blind eye and do business with them. You spend a few days in a blur of rum and noise. You buy a new shirt, eat a meal that doesn't consist of hardtack, and sleep in a bed that doesn't sway. It feels glorious and deeply unsatisfying at the same time. The camaraderie of the ship is replaced by the loud, shallow company of the tavern. All too soon, your share of the plunder is gone. You've spent it, gambled it, or had it stolen from you in a drunken stupor. You are broke again. And so are most of your crewmates. The wild holiday is over. It's time to go back to sea. As you walk back towards the ship, your head pounding from a hangover, you look back at the chaotic port. It was the paradise. It was a pressure valve, a place to blow off the steam that builds up during the long, boring months at sea. It was a necessary part of the cycle. The grinding work, the violent score, the brief, mad explosion of spending. And then back to the grind again. The shore leave is not the reward. It's just a pause before the misery starts all over. The return to the sea is a sobering experience. The hangovers fade. The easy pleasures of the port become a distant memory. And you are once again enveloped by the familiar routine of labor and boredom. You set out in search of another prize. But this time, your luck runs out. One grade on. The lookout's cry is different. It's not the excited sail-ho of a potential victim, but a more urgent, fearful shout. 2 sails on the horizon. And, as they draw closer, their profile becomes terrifyingly clear. They are not merchant ships. They are Royal Navy warships, sleek and fast, bristling with cannons. They are hunters, and you are the prey. A wave of cold, professional dread washes over the pirate crew. The chaotic energy of attacking a merchantman is replaced by a grim, focused desperation. The chase is on, but this time, the roles are reversed. You are no longer the predator playing a slow game of chess. You are the cornered animal, running for your life. The crew works the sails with a frantic efficiency, trying to squeeze every knot of speed from your vessel. But the naval ships are designed for this. They are faster, better armed, and manned by disciplined crews. The gap between you and them slowly, inexorably, closes. The naval commander doesn't open fire with a warning shot. He opens fire with a full, devastating broadside aimed at your hull. The Navy's goal is not to capture your ship for its cargo. It's to destroy you. The deck erupts in a hell of noise, smoke, and splintering wood. The screams of the wounded are sharpened immediate. The fight is short and brutal. Your cannons, designed for intimidating merchants, are no match for the heavy guns of the warships. Your mast is shattered. Your rudder is destroyed. Your ship is a cripple, helpless wreck, dead in the water. The naval ships close in, and a flood of uniformed marines, armed with muskets and bayonets, swarm over your rails. There is no quarter given. The fight is a desperate, hopeless last stand. But soon, the surviving pirates, you among them, are overwhelmed. You are disarmed, beaten, and thrown in chains. The democratic society of your ship is gone, replaced by the iron-fisted authority of the Royal Navy. You are now a prisoner, crammed into the foul, dark hold of the naval vessel with your former crewmates. The journey to your final destination is a misery of starvation, sickness, and despair. You are no longer a pirate, a shareholder, a voter. You are a common criminal, awaiting trial and certain condemnation. Your trial takes place in a colonial port, perhaps Jamaica or Virginia. It's not a fair hearing. It's a show trial, an admiralty court designed for one purpose, to make an example of you. The judges are grim-faced officials who see you not as a man, but as a pest to be exterminated. And here's a peculiar but true detail of these pirate trials. The concept of innocent until proven guilty was often suspended. Under the laws of the time, pirates could be convicted on the testimony of a single witness, and crew members were often pressured to testify against their former comrades in exchange for a pardon. The articles you signed, the very document that gave you your rights on the ship, are now presented as the primary evidence of your guilt of contract with a criminal conspiracy. The historical debate here concerns the very definition of a pirate. Were you a revolutionary, a rebel against God and man, or were you simply an unemployed sailor who made a rational economic choice? The court has no interest in these nuances. The prosecution paints you as a monster, a scourge of the seas. Your defense, if you even have one, is brushed aside. The argument from historians is that these trials were less about justice and more about re-establishing the state's monopoly on violence and trade. The pirate, with his self-governance and independent enterprise, was a direct threat to the imperial economic system. He had to be publicly and legally crushed. The verdict is a foregone conclusion. You and your crewmates are found guilty of piracy. The judge, his face impassive, puts on a black cap and sentences you to be hanged by the neck until you are dead. Your short, brutal career as a pirate is over. You have reached the most common and most predictable final chapter for those in your profession. Not a blaze of glory, not a peaceful retirement on a pile of treasure, but the cold iron of shackles and the stark pronouncement of a judge. The final days of your life are spent in a sweltering, crowded jail cell. The camaraderie of the ship is a distant memory, replaced by the grim, silent fellowship of the condemned. You are no longer part of a crew. You are just one of a batch of men waiting to die. The date of your execution is set, and it approaches with an unnerving speed. On the appointed day, you are led from the jail. Your hands are bound behind your back. A procession is formed. This is not a quiet, private affair. It is a public spectacle, a piece of state-sponsored theater. You and the other condemned pirates are marched through the streets of the town towards the execution site. The streets are lined with people. Men, women, and children have all turned out to see the show. They jeer. They throw rotten vegetables. They shout insults. To them, you are not a person who once made a desperate choice. You are a villain from a storybook, a monster getting his just desserts. The authorities encourage this atmosphere. It's a powerful deterrent, a visceral lesson to any other sailors in the crowd who might be tempted by the pirate life. Your destination is the gallows, often erected on a spit of land at the harbor's edge, a place called Execution Dock. The location is symbolic. You lived your criminal life on the water, and you will die facing it. The gallows is a stark, imposing structure, a wooden frame with multiple nooses hanging from a crossbeam. An entire crew could be hanged at once. You are forced to climb the steps to the platform. From here, you have a final, panoramic view of the world you are about to leave. You see the harbor, the ships at anchor, the vast, indifferent sea beyond. You might see your own ship, now refitted as a naval vessel. A final insult. A preacher might be present, offering a final parent, exhorting you to confess your sins. Some condemned men use this as an opportunity for a final act of defiance. They would give a rousing, unrepentant speech, cursing the authorities and defending their life of piracy. These dying words were often printed and sold in pamphlets, becoming a strange form of popular literature. The famous pirate William Fly, for instance, approached his own hanging with contempt, reportedly criticizing the hangmaness noose and tying it himself to ensure it would work properly. This is the source of a lingering historical question. Did pirates really go to their deaths with such bravado? The popular image is of the defiant rogue, laughing at the gallows, while some certainly did, driven by genuine conviction or a desire to control their own final narrative. Many historical accounts describe men who were terrified, who wept, or who were too drunk or beaten down to do anything but submit. The truth is likely a spectrum of human reactions to an unthinkable situation. Your own reaction is probably one of numbing fear. The noose is placed around your neck. It rough and bites into your skin. The hangman pulls a hood over your head, plunging you into darkness. You can hear the crowd, the cry of the gulls, the whisper of the wind. This is the end of all your senses. There is a moment of dreadful silence. Then, the sharp crack of the trapdoor release. You do not fall far. This is not a modern long drop hanging designed for a quick, humane death by a broken neck. This is strangulation. You swing in the air, your body convulsing, fighting for breath that will not come. It is an agonizing, slow, and public death. It is designed to be. And here is the final, gruesome detail of the pirate's end. After you are dead, your body is often not immediately cut down. It might be left hanging for several days as a warning. Afterwards, it might be taken down and debited. Your corpse would be coated in tar to preserve it, then placed in a custom-made iron cage, and hung from a prominent point at the entrance to the harbor. For months, even years, your tarred, caged skeleton would swing in the sea breeze. A constant, silent sermon on the price of piracy. Ale and mark for sailors to navigate by. A feast for the gulls. This is the most likely end to your journey. Not a watery grave in a glorious battle, but a slow dance in the air, followed by an eternity as a piece of public decoration. The gold was a myth. The freedom was a brief illusion. The reality was a short, brutal life of filth, disease, and labor, culminating in a squalid, public, and dishonorable end. The Jolly Roger flag has been lowered for the last time.